Imagine two people lose their job on the same day. Same salary, same experience, same city. 6 months later, one of them is doing better than ever, while the other is buried in debt and panic. The difference between them wasn't intelligence, education, or even luck. It was something much simpler: cash. Not millions of dollars, not some huge inheritance, just a financial cushion sitting quietly in a bank account. And the real power of that cash is something most people completely misunderstand. Right now, nearly half of Americans would struggle to cover a $1,000 emergency expense without borrowing money. One car repair, one medical bill, one broken appliance. For millions of people, that single event triggers a chain reaction of credit card debt, stress, and financial scrambling. The problem isn't that people haven't heard the advice. Everyone knows they should build an emergency fund. Everyone knows they should save 3 to 6 months of expenses. The advice is everywhere, yet most people still don't have it. And that's because the real benefit of cash is rarely explained correctly. People talk about emergency funds like they're just insurance, something you use when something goes wrong. But that's only a small part of the story. The true power of having cash goes much deeper. It changes how you think, it changes how you negotiate, and it changes the opportunities available in your life. Researchers from Princeton and Harvard studied what happens to the brain when people experience financial scarcity. What they found was disturbing. Financial stress doesn't just make people worried, it literally reduces cognitive capacity. When your mind is constantly thinking about bills, rent, groceries, and how to survive until the next paycheck, your brain has less space for anything else. Long term planning becomes harder. Complex decisions become exhausting. You start thinking only about immediate problems. Psychologists call this phenomenon tunneling. Your focus narrows to the crisis in front of you, while everything else fades into the background. Career opportunities, investments, personal growth, all of it becomes secondary to the simple question of how you'll survive the next month. This isn't about discipline or willpower. It's a measurable effect of financial pressure on the brain. Now imagine the opposite situation. Imagine you have 6 months of expenses sitting in a savings account. You know exactly where the money is. You know you could access it quickly if needed. That knowledge does something powerful to your psychology. The constant background stress disappears. Your mind has space again. You start thinking strategically instead of defensively. And that mental shift changes almost every decision you make. One of the biggest areas where this shows up is work. Think about salary negotiations. Two employees with identical jobs ask for a raise. One of them has several months of savings. The other lives paycheck to paycheck. The person with savings negotiates very differently. They can push back on the first offer. They can reference market rates. They can ask for time to think. And if the company refuses, they can start looking for another job without panic. The person without savings operates under completely different psychology. Every negotiation feels risky. Pushing too hard might mean losing the job. Asking for more feels dangerous. So they settle faster. They accept smaller raises. They avoid confrontation. Over the course of 10 years, that difference in negotiation power can easily add up to hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost income. The savings account quietly paid for itself many times over. Cash also changes the economics of everyday life. There's a concept economists call the poverty premium. When you don't have money, everything becomes more expensive. You can't buy in bulk when items go on sale because you don't have the upfront cash. So you pay higher prices week after week. You can't pay annual insurance premiums that offer discounts, so you pay the higher monthly rate. You delay small repairs because money is tight, which eventually turns them into much larger and more expensive problems. Without cash reserves, urgency dominates every financial decision. You need the solution today, so you accept whatever price is available. But when you have money available, you gain something incredibly valuable: time. You can wait for better deals. You can compare options. You can negotiate. You can choose the best value instead of the fastest solution. Over years, that difference quietly saves thousands of dollars. Cash doesn't just protect you from bad situations, it also allows you to capture good ones. Opportunities rarely arrive when your finances are perfectly prepared. They appear suddenly and disappear quickly. A business opportunity shows up. A property is selling below market value. The stock market crashes and prices drop dramatically. People with cash can act. Everyone else watches from the sidelines. History shows this again and again. During major market crashes, investors with cash buy aggressively while others panic or sit frozen. When markets recover, those buyers often generate enormous returns. They weren't necessarily smarter investors. They simply had liquidity available when opportunity appeared. But the influence of cash goes beyond money and investments. It affects some of the most important decisions in life. Should you leave a toxic job? Should you move to a city with better opportunities? Should you start a business or go back to school? Without financial cushion, these decisions feel terrifying. Even if they are clearly the right move for your future, the risk feels too high. So people stay where they are. They stay in jobs they dislike. They stay in situations that limit their growth. Not because they want to, but because they feel they have no choice. Cash changes that equation. When you have savings, you gain options. You gain the ability to choose what's best for your life instead of what's safest for your next paycheck. Most financial experts recommend building 3 to 6 months of living expenses as a cash reserve. At first, that number can sound overwhelming, but it's simply the result of consistent saving over time. The first milestone is much smaller, around $1,000. For many people, reaching that point already eliminates most financial emergencies and stops the cycle of credit card debt. From there, the goal expands to 3 months of expenses. At that level, losing a job becomes stressful but manageable instead of catastrophic. Eventually, 6 months of expenses creates true financial breathing room. This is where the psychological transformation really begins. Decisions become calmer. Negotiations become stronger. Opportunities become accessible. Where you keep this money also matters. It shouldn't sit in a normal checking account earning almost nothing. High-yield savings accounts now offer interest rates around 4 to 5%, while still keeping the money safe and accessible. The goal of this money isn't to maximize returns. Its purpose is stability. Some people argue that this money should be invested instead. After all, the stock market historically returns much more than a savings account. But that argument misunderstands the purpose of emergency funds. Investments fluctuate. Markets can drop 30% in a matter of weeks. If your emergency fund is invested and you lose your job during a market crash, You could be forced to sell investments at the worst possible time. Cash provides certainty. The number in your account today will still be there tomorrow. That reliability is what makes it powerful. Think of your emergency fund like the foundation of a house. The foundation doesn't need to produce returns. Its job is simply to hold everything else up. Once that foundation exists, everything else becomes easier. Investing becomes less stressful. Career risks become more manageable. Opportunities become easier to pursue. Without that cushion, financial life often becomes a series of compromises. People accept the first job offer instead of negotiating. They skip medical care because of the cost. They delay education or training that could improve their future. Each compromise feels small in the moment, but over years, those small compromises shape the direction of a life. The difference between someone who constantly operates under financial pressure and someone who operates with financial stability can become enormous over time. The surprising truth is that cash isn't just money sitting idle in a bank account. It's leverage. It's psychological freedom. It's negotiating power. It's the ability to make decisions from confidence instead of fear. And for many people, building that first financial cushion is the moment when their entire relationship with money begins to change. Because once you have cash reserves, something subtle happens. You stop operating from scarcity. You start operating from choice. And that shift might be the most valuable financial advantage a person can ever have.